This is part 2, episode 91. Bei Bei snapped, "You dare slander your eldest senior brother. Go, go." Hui Yu Hao chortled as Wang Dong'er pushed his wheelchair out. "Yu Hao!" Bei Bei suddenly called. Hui Yu Hao turned back. Bei Bei lowered his voice and said, "You have to prioritize your own safety if tonight's operation cannot be completed. You're the true future of the academy and the Tang sect, and you cannot brave any dangers. Do you understand?" Hui Yu Hao smiled faintly, and answered, "Rest assured, eldest senior brother. Have we not arranged this way before? According to our plan, everything will be fine. Don't forget, I can." He stopped talking, and gestured with his hands. Bei Bei's expression softened and relaxed as he nodded lightly and said, "Still, please be careful." "Yes." Wang Dong'er pushed Hui Yu Hao out of Bei Bei's room and returned to their own. "Now that I think about it, I'm looking forward to tonight." Wang Dong'er's eyes suddenly grew excited as she shut the door behind her. Hui Yu Hao turned to look at her and said seriously, "Dong'er, when we are going through with the operation tonight, you can't." I know. I have to think about the big picture. You've said that so many times." Wang Dong'er smiled enchantingly as she spoke. However, a thread of anxiety quickly flowed through her eyes. "But I'm worried about you when I'm not by your side. Furthermore, you have to face so many more dangers and perils tonight compared to the rest of us. You have to control two situations at once. It's going to be so tiring for you. In the event that you're exposed, you don't have to care about us. We will be able to escape even if we have to fight our way out forcefully. You must take care of yourself." Hui Yu Hao nodded. He grasped Wang Dong'er's hands and pulled her over to his side as he placed his arms around her slim waist and leaned in. "I'm worried about one thing right now, the road we have to take when we are leaving." "Eh?" Hui Yu Hao was still leaning against Wang Dong'er when he suddenly sat up straight, and his eyes became a lot sharper and more focused than before. He was staring at the tea table in the room. Hui Yu Hao had always been cautious and careful. He had swept the room with his spiritual power habitually when they came back, and he always started from one direction before he rotated his spiritual power in a circle so that he could make his sweep as thorough as he could. Hui Yu Hao could feel that something wasn't right when his spiritual power came across the tea table, because there was an extra something on top. There was a letter, and it was definitely not there when they left for breakfast before this. Wang Dong'er immediately raised her guard and half-squatted like a leopard. She leaned in close to Hui Yu Hao's body, and spiritual undulations instantly rippled from her body as she prepared to adapt and react to any eventuality. Hui Yu Hao waved his hand and said, "There's no danger. I'm not sure who placed this here, but it looks like someone thoughtful." He waved his right hand at the letter on the tabletop as he spoke, and used the Tang sect's capturing crane controlling dragon. The letter floated into the air and drifted towards him. Wang Dong'er raised her right hand, and thin rays of faint golden light waltzed through the air as they nimbly removed the letter from the envelope without damaging its contents at all. Their teamwork seemed very casual, but there was so much tacit understanding in it. The letter opened up in mid-air to reveal a row of small and graceful words. "Leave immediately. The western side is still safe for now. Hurry, hurry." No name was left at the end, there was only a circular marking. Wang Dong'er's eyebrows knitted faintly as she snapped around to look at Hui Yu Hao. Hui Yu Hao contemplated for a moment before an awkward look surfaced on his face. "You know who sent this?" Wang Dong'er was very sensitive, and she could immediately tell from his expression that he knew. Hui Yu Hao tilted his head and said, "It should be Juzi. I've seen this mark before. She used to leave this mark behind on the soul tools she created back at the Sun Moon Academy." Wang Dong'er grunted and said, "You're getting it on with girls everywhere, huh? So, it's a letter from an old flame." Hui Yu Hao forced a laugh and said, "Now's not the time to be jealous, Dong'er. Plus, don't you already know my heart? There's no space for anybody else in my heart but you." Wang Dong'er giggled and snatched the letter from the air. "I don't get jealous so easily. But Juzi is very nice to you, indeed. She risked being discovered to send you a letter at a time such as this. You have to remember her feelings and her favor. Hu Yuhao tilted his head once more and said, "It seems like the situation is a lot more perilous than we had originally imagined." Hu Yuhao flicked the letter in his hands lightly and scrutinized the words once more. He lowered his voice and said, "I can tell from the words that Juzi knows some things about what the Sun Moon Empire wants to do against us. However, she's from the Sun Moon Empire after all, and she's also engaged to the Crown Prince. I don't think she wants to tell us too much. Things are probably going to change, and chaos may break out after the finals. The Sun Moon Empire and the Holy Ghost Church might make a move against us immediately afterwards." Wang Dong asked, "The letter says that the western side is still safe for now. What does that mean? Does this mean that our judgments before this were wrong?" Hu Yuhao laughed bitterly and replied, "The western side is our only choice whether or not our predictions and judgments are wrong. The news that our eldest senior sister has given us is simply too astounding. There are Class 9 stationary soul cannons locking down the other three sides. Those are frightening forces that are sufficient to kill Title Doluor, and possibly even Transcendent Doluor. They are considered the Sun Moon Empire's strategic weapons, and they are taking out so many of them at once this time. It's clear that they have made up their minds. Furthermore, they must have complementary locator-type soul tools with them. The Star Luo Empire gave us that information. That also means that Shu Jojo, Wei Na, and the others all know about this. There is no question that they will choose the western path, as well. Under such circumstances, we will become even weaker and more isolated if we choose to break through the other three fronts by ourselves. It's better if we concentrate our forces and make an attempt on the western front." It's a pity that she didn't mention what the situation was like on the western side. Wang Dong said, "I believed at the start that working together with the body sect was like asking a tiger for its skin. They don't typically do things like normal people. Furthermore, the plan cannot keep up with everything that's happening. Everybody might be in danger when the time comes." Hu Yuhao continued, "The Tang sect is the smallest target, and that's our only advantage for now. Furthermore, if we end up facing an unbeatable foe, or we find ourselves in irrevocable danger, I can only expose myself and take everyone into my demiplane of specters. At most, we can hide in there for some time before coming back out. Radiant City can't stay locked down forever. Anyhow, we will follow the other three main powers to break through the western front when the time comes, and if something happens or problems arise, I will immediately hide and protect myself." Wang Dong said, "All right. Fortunately, you still have that trump card. I wouldn't be so agreeable to this, otherwise." Hu Yuhao said, "We should plan more carefully so that we can plug any loopholes that might appear as tightly as we can." Okay. The deathly silence in Radiant City lasted all the way till midday. The overly excited citizens from yesterday were slowly waking up, and everything seemed to return to normal. However, the final that was about to happen the next day seemed to be a little colorless compared to the Tang sect's epic fight against the Holy Ghost sect the previous day. It was clear that the Tang sect was undoubtedly stronger than Shrek Academy, as they had managed to defeat the Holy Ghost sect. However, the only uncertainty was how much the Tang sect could recover after their excessive exhaustion and consumption from their previous battle. The sun slunk towards the west as time continued to pass, and Radiant City's atmosphere became a little more bustling. The reason for that was because another tournament close to home was about to begin. This was also the final round. The Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament, organized by the three underground organizations, was about to have its grand finals tonight. The three underground organizations sent forth 3 soul engineers each. The grand finals betting process was spectacular and colorful. There were many details regarding the 9 participating soul engineers circulating around. The audience was allowed to bet on rankings, on the first 3, and on the champion. There were several other strange betting options for the rankings, and many gamblers were spoiled for choice. The 3 underground organizations thought as long and hard as they could in order to maximize their profits. They unleashed every single ounce of their influence so that they could lead as many citizens to the grand finals, and so that these citizens could participate in the last betting phase of the tournament. The prizes that the participating Seoul engineers stood to win in the grand finals were extremely generous and luxurious. The final champion would win a Class 9 Seoul tool. The Seoul tool itself was a priceless item, and the champion would also win 1 ton of rare metals that the champion could choose at his or her own discretion at the same time. 49 rare metals would be available for the picking when the time came, as long as the total weight didn't exceed 1 ton, and each of the rare metals didn't weigh more than 100 kilos. The first and second runners-up had prizes as well, but these prizes were stark in comparison to what the champion would receive. They didn't get Class 9 Seoul tools, and would only get 1 ton of rare metals. The remaining Seoul engineers wouldn't win a single dime. This reward system was undoubtedly aimed at instigating the 9 participating Seoul engineers' competitiveness and will to win. Furthermore, these were the prizes that were to be given on the surface. The 3 underground organizations each had their own form of encouragement for their participating Seoul engineers, and these Seoul engineers would receive plentiful rewards from their respective organizations if they won something in the grand finals. This attractive reward system was the reason why so many young Seoul engineers had participated in this tournament. Inside the Green Hotel. Tang San and Tang Wu aren't here yet. Did you not inform them about the timing? Third elder glared at Chenan solemnly, and his eyes became a little cold and eerie. Chenan's forehead broke out in a cold sweat as he said hurriedly, I have informed them. I informed them a long time ago. I told them right after the semifinals ended that they had to be here early today, so that we could make some final preparations. Humph. If they don't show up on time, you will compensate the Duskwater Alliance's losses. You will have to pay with your life, Third Elder muttered coldly. Calm down, teacher. I believe they'll be here soon. In the end, the rewards are very generous and extravagant. 96, Huang Jing chimed in with a smile on his face. He was as calm and steady as he had always been. This was in stark contrast to 98 standing beside him, who had already been eliminated from the tournament. 98's face seemed a little dark and gloomy. The only thought in Mock's head was his darkness green dragon. Don't trouble him anymore, old 3. I believe that kid will arrive. We need to have a proper discussion with him after the tournament. A deep and thick voice rang out. The Duskwater Alliance Master, Nangong Wan, appeared in the hotel's main lobby. The entire Green Hotel seemed like it was under martial law, as uncountable men in black filled up half of its main hall. Nangong Wan, Old 3, Mock and Huang Jing stood in the center of the main hall, along with several large trunks. What they contained was obvious. These trunks were used to carry the rare metals that were to be used for the tournament. Sounds traveled from the entrance right at this moment. Under the guidance of 2 men in black, a wheelchair appeared in Nangong Wan, and Third Elder's field of view. Hui Yuhao had become Tang Wu, and he was still wearing a cold and solemn look on his face. He Kai too had become Tang Sai, and he was wearing a mask as always. Nangong Wan and Third Elder appeared a lot more delighted when they appeared, and Chenan hurriedly went forward to welcome them. You guys are finally here, my honorable guests. He didn't dare to question why Hui Yuhao was late, and he gave him a light nod when their gazes met to signal that the deal that they had agreed upon was prepared and everything was fine. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Hui Yuhao's mouth, and he returned a look to signal that everything was in place on his end as well. Nangong Wan came forward personally to greet them. You guys made it here in the end, and all is well as long as you guys are on time. The Duskwater Alliance's honor and glory will be on your shoulders to uphold and defend. Naturally, we will do our best, Hui Yuhao replied in a cold mutter. Hui Yuhao was wary and cautious of these 2 people, who could well be elders of the Holy Ghost Church. Hui Yuhao couldn't determine their strength with his current cultivation, and their power could definitely be described as deep and immeasurable. The Holy Ghost Church's mighty influence and strength had gradually entered Hui Yuhao's field of view as they gradually surfaced in the world. The dragon god Doluo, Mu Yen, had told Hui Yuhao before that evil soul masters had a very difficult time becoming titled Doluo. However, Hui Yuhao was sure that the Holy Ghost Church, which had been through many years of experience and history, should have mastered a way for evil soul masters to break through that barrier. Of all the evil soul masters that he had seen so far, 4 or 5 were undoubtedly titled Doluor, and the 2 men in front of him were at least titled Doluor. The Sea God's Pavilion's elders would have a real headache if they had to face these guys, let alone himself. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao didn't know what positions they held within the Holy Ghost Church. He knew that their ranks couldn't be that low, as the Duskwater Alliance controlled nearly half of the overall underground economy. The Duskwater Alliance was the Holy Ghost Church's financial source, so it had to be under the command of people who were relatively higher in rank and status. Nangong Wan stared at Hu Yuhao curiously and said, "You gave me a very strong and lasting impression when we last met, Tang Wu, my little friend. We have to get a little closer to each other after the tournament." Hu Yuhao immediately put up a wary and cautious expression as he said, "There's nothing to be close about. I'm just here for the tournament, and I won't establish any connections with your underground organizations." Nangong Wan laughed heartily and replied, "That's all right. We'll talk about this again after the tournament. Chenin, please introduce tomorrow's finals to our 2 little friends." Chenin felt his heart pumping vigorously in his chest as he listened to Hu Yuhao and Nangong Wan's conversation. This guy's circumstance seems to be a little different from my judgment. The Duskwater Alliance master should be from that place, so how can he not recognize him? But Tang Wu's abilities are clearly. Chenin felt a little doubtful and suspicious inside, but he had no other choice at this point in time. He had gotten many benefits from Hu Yuhao already, and this was in addition to the fact that they were about to work together again. Chenin forced the doubts in his heart down. "Yes, Alliance Master." Chenin bowed respectfully in Nangong Wan's direction, before he turned towards Hu Yuhao and He Kai-tu. This season's Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament's Grand Finals shall be carried out tomorrow. The Duskwater Alliance is organizing the Grand Final together with the Common Alliance and the Alto Chamber of Commerce, and it will happen in the western suburbs. We have arranged everything on our side. We have finally decided upon the tournament's rules after meticulous discussion. All 3 sides will send 3 people each for the Grand Finals. Every participant will be given 6 hours to craft a soul tool, and there are no limits on the materials to be used. However, each contestant can only make 1 soul tool, and this phase will conclude after 6 hours. All 9 participants will go through 3 competitive rounds after that. Technique will be tested in the first round, during which a mysterious task will be given. We're not sure what it is at the moment. All 9 soul engineers will be very exhausted after 6 hours of crafting, so this round will undoubtedly be a great test for you all. The lowest scoring participant will be eliminated, while the remaining 8 will proceed to the next round. The second round will be actual combat. Those who obtain the highest score in the technique round will face off against the lowest scorers in the final 8, and 4 people will progress into the next round. The second highest scorer will fight the second from the last, and so on. The 4 who will go on into the next round will be determined this way, and the final 4 will draw lots for the next round, and the final round will happen after that. The tournament's rules have been designed to be as fair as possible. However, there are some things that we have to pay attention to. First, everyone can only forge and use 1 single soul tool, so it will be up to the soul engineer himself or herself whether the soul tool will be focused on attack or defense. They cannot expend too much energy when crafting them, either. Otherwise, they'll run a risk of being eliminated in the technique round. Furthermore, the higher they score in the technique round, the greater the advantage they'll have in the subsequent round of 8. You guys need to have proper planning from the moment you start the 6-hour crafting phase. Both Hu Yuhao and He Kai-tu felt a little astonished as they listened to Chenin's introduction. The Grand Finals organized by the 3 underground organizations were far more complicated than they had imagined. They had to craft soul tools first, and they would have to go through a technique assessment, and 3 different rounds of combat to clinch the championship. Winning in this tournament would be quite a challenge. What they didn't know was that all 3 underground organizations were treating this championship very seriously. Furthermore, the Common Alliance and the Alto Chamber of Commerce intended to team up against the Duskwater Alliance. This was the reason why the three organizations went through countless rounds of discussion and negotiation before they came up with these rules for the grand finals. These rules were so that their representative soul engineers had to rely on their own abilities to finish the tournament. Of course, it did seem like the Common Alliance and the Alto Chamber of Commerce had an advantage overall. They had 6 people after all, so it would be a lot easier for them to arrange their strategies. Chenin finished his introduction, and Nangong Wan's expression became a little more solemn than before. He lowered his voice and said, "My 3 friends, you are representing the Duskwater Alliance in this competition, and I have absolute faith in your abilities. However, you have to be prepared to resist the other 2 organizations, as their strategies are likely to target us. Since you are representing the Duskwater Alliance, we will not waste your time. Every one of you will be rewarded whether or not you clinch the championship in the end, and I believe the Common Alliance and the Alto Chamber of Commerce cannot possibly match up to these rewards. Furthermore, we will give them out here, on the spot. Bring them up, please." Nangong Wan waved his right hand as he spoke, and 4 men in black immediately walked over carrying a big trunk between them. All 4 men were tough and muscular, but even they struggled a little as they lifted the trunk together. Hui Yuhao subconsciously released his spiritual power and surveyed the trunk. However, even his reliable spiritual power couldn't pierce through this thick and heavy black trunk. As it brushed against its surface, his spiritual power was kept completely outside. Some of his spiritual power was even refracted away. This is... Hui Yuhao swiftly came to a conclusion. This truck had to be lined with thick lead, meant to block all kinds of tricks and intangible things. There was a layer of steel alloyed with mithril on the outside. Furthermore, he could tell from how these muscular men were struggling that the trunk should weigh between 250 to 500 kilos. What is this? It's forged from pure lead, and wrapped with metal that contains mithril. Hui Yuhao wasn't the only one who was surprised. He Kai-tu and even Huang Zheng widened their eyes as they stared at the trunk. They didn't have spiritual detection, but they were still quite sensitive to metal as soul engineers, and they could both feel that the trunk contained mithril. So precious and valuable. The trunk was placed carefully in front of them. Nangong Wan personally walked towards the trunk, raised his right hand and pressed on the trunk's side. A small screen bounced up, with many sophisticated characters and patterns on its surface. Nangong Wan pressed his palm against the screen, and all 5 of his fingers tapped rapidly and rhythmically. This was a passcode-locked explosive case. Passcode-locked cases were considered special trunks that were sealed with both soul tools and a passcode, and they could only be opened with preset patterns and activation methods. As for the explosive in the name, there was no question that an erroneous passcode entry would trigger the explosives inside, and a frightening explosion would follow. However, these explosive cases typically gave a few chances for wrong passcode entries, and thus wouldn't explode on the first wrong try. Still, these chances couldn't be more than 5, and there were many different kinds of secret passcode forms to seal away whatever was inside. This was just a trunk, but it could match a Class 6 soul tool. Hui Yuhao had been concentrating his spiritual power ever since Nangong Wan pressed his palm against the trunk. He relied on his impressive spiritual power to forcefully memorize Nangong Wan's rapid tapping and its frequency. Even though it might not be useful in the future, memorizing the pattern was still a potential opportunity. Nangong Wan tapped continuously for 20 seconds before he lifted his hand and the screen popped back into place. Faint cracking sounds could be heard as the trunk began to split open from the center of its lid. The 3rd elder was standing beside Nangong Wan, and he raised his hand as a hemispherical barrier enveloped everyone inside. He was also inside this hemisphere, as was Mok. Hui Yuhao and the 2 other contestants drew a cold breath from the moment this crack appeared on the trunk, and they understood at the same time why 3rd elder had to barricade everyone inside. There was an indescribably somber and desolate aura emanating from within, and it seemed to stem from the bravery and majesty of an entire army in shining armor. The 3rd elder and Nangong Wan had no reaction, while Hui Yuhao, He Kai-tu, Huang Zheng, and Mok turned pale as intense astonishment broke out across their faces. Hui Yuhao's sensations were the deepest, as he possessed the strongest spiritual power. It was because of how mighty his spiritual power was that he felt the greatest impact. He felt as if he were facing a metal torrent formed by an enormous army, and this torrent carried hysterical hostility and killing intent as it surged towards him. This torrent was so strong that it almost made him lose control over his spirit. A pale golden light emerged over his body, and his spirit eyes were immediately unleashed, and only then could he calm and steady himself. However, Hu Yuhao managed to use his imitation in the nick of time, so that his actual soul rings weren't revealed in front of everyone. This, He Kai-tu blurted out. He suddenly recalled the agreement he had with Hu Yuhao after uttering one word, and hurriedly closed his mouth. However, the bewilderment in his eyes was a lot more intense than before. The trunk had completely opened up at this moment to reveal its contents. Special filters made of a material was known as jade rubber filled its inner layers. The rubber itself was white, but it was extremely tough and bouncy. Jade rubber was typically used as a cushion or buffer. There was something in the center of all the blocks of jade rubber inside the trunk. This item was roughly 1.5 meters long, and had a cylindrical body. It had a conical tip, and a ringed groove at the back. The entire item had no cracks or kinks, and it seemed like everything blended together into one integrated body. The item was pale gold in color, and it shone with a metallic luster. The violent and hysterical killing intent and fearsome aura came from this item, and everyone felt as if this sensation was becoming worse over time. Hu Yuhao and the others felt their hearts tremble even though they were only looking at it. Mok swallowed some saliva as he stammered, this is. Huangjing could no longer maintain his composure, and he blurted out, Class 9. It's a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell. What did a Class 9 stationary soul cannon mean? It was evaluated as Class 9, and that meant it was a Class 9 soul tool in itself. It was also a Class 9 soul tool that could only be used once. This cannon shell could even be fired over half the entire continent at a target when used with a Class 9 soul cannon, and it could also be detonated at a shorter distance without a Class 9 soul cannon. However, there was a prerequisite, as the person detonating this cannon had to have some way to distance himself or herself from the explosion, as the user would vanish from the face of the earth otherwise. A Class 9 stationary cannon shell's destructiveness was enough to instill fear in even transcendent Doluo. The only outcome that could happen when normal titled Doluo faced one of these was death. The Sun Moon Empire was the only entity capable of manufacturing Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells at the moment. Only those at the higher levels of the empire knew how many there were, but there couldn't possibly be that many. Why did the Body Sect, Shrek Academy, the Star Luo Empire and the other powers choose to break through the Western Front when they discussed how the Sun Moon Empire was locking down the Radiant City? What did they fear so much? It wasn't because they didn't consider that dangers could arise on the Western Front. Instead, it was because they didn't dare to take the risk of traveling on the other 3 roads. It had been confirmed that there were at least 5 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells stationed in the other 3 regions. Even titled Doluo had no chance against a frightening entity of this level, if they were the ones who were locked on. What was even more frightening was that Class 9 cannon shells had an extremely large area of effect, and an explosion would eradicate an entire area around it, not just a single spot. If 5 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells were stationed in one direction, even powerful beings like Elder Xian would be wary. Perhaps he might have the ability to survive this ordeal, but there was no way he could protect the people around him. Every single person in the world considered Class 9 stationary cannon shells priceless and inestimable. Not in their wildest dreams did Hu Yuhao and the others expect that the Duskwater Alliance would take out such a reward so that they could win this tournament. Hu Yuhao had learned from Chenin before this that the Dusk River Alliance would give out a share of their profits from all the bets and wagers, but this cannon shell was more generous than all the shares they could give, the reason being this cannon shell couldn't be valued with money, as money couldn't even buy such an item. Hu Yuhao had heard from Xian Ziwen that the Sun Moon Empire didn't possess more than 50 Class 9 stationary cannon shells. Some were reported openly, while some were hidden away in secret, and only the Emperor himself knew the exact number. But what was certain was that a single shell could eradicate an entire small city, while 2 shells were enough to annihilate a mid-sized city. Radiant City was the greatest city on the continent, but even a city as large as Radiant City couldn't possibly take more than 10 shells. It wasn't hard to see how terrifying these cannon shells were. One of the main reasons why the Sun Moon Empire dared to go up against the Dolor Continent's 3 native empires 1 versus 3 was because of their Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. This was also one of the most substantial reasons why the other 3 empires hadn't invaded them yet. The Duskwater Alliance, or perhaps the Holy Ghost Church, had too much influence and might. They actually managed to obtain a national-level strategic weapon. Hu Yuhao had unswerving will and determination, but even he felt his heart pounding vigorously in his chest. His eyes grew hot and passionate. This wasn't just a cannon shell in his eyes, this was also a sample. If he could study and scrutinize this cannon shell through and through, he could possibly enable the Tang sect to craft Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells of its own. At the very least, he could probably make it easier for teacher Xian to break through in his research. There was one problem: was the stationary cannon shell that easy to get? Was winning this championship more important than this cannon shell? I'm sure you guys have already realized, yes, this is a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell, and it's called Annihilation Storm. I will only tell you its effects and how it's used when one of you returns with the championship. I can guarantee that we will present you with this gift on the spot when you clinch the championship. So, you guys have to work hard. Nangong Wan waved his sleeve as he spoke, and the trunk closed up again. That violent and crazed aura was swiftly covered up. Hu Yuhao and the others could finally breathe easy. However, there was only vengeance and hatred in Mok's eyes as he glared at Hu Yuhao. His defeat to Hu Yuhao in the previous round meant he no longer had the opportunity to vie for this cannon shell, and he had even been forced to relinquish his ranked carving knife, his darkness green dragon. Hu Yuhao didn't care about his gaze at all. His heart and emotions had settled down by now, and his eyes became clear and transparent, just like before, though he Kai-Tu was still a little exhilarated behind him. Work hard, youngsters. Nangong Wan spoke, with a faint smile on his face. However, his eyes were fixed on Hu Yuhao from beginning to end as he uttered these words. He was momentarily stunned when he saw that Hu Yuhao's eyes had become clear and transparent once more, and nodded in his direction. Let's go. Nangong Wan swung his hand through the air. He and the 3rd elder took point, while Hu Yuhao and the 3 others followed behind them, and throngs of men dressed in black flanked and escorted them. 3rd elder naturally couldn't let these men in black carry the Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell, and he stowed it away within his storage-type soul tool. They headed towards the western suburbs once they departed the Green Hotel. Hu Yuhao didn't have any opinions about where the tournament was to be carried out. However, his eyes were starting to close at this point, as if he were trying to concentrate and calm himself down so that he could prepare himself mentally for the tournament. He Kai-Tu fully recovered only when the cold wind outside billowed against him as he exited the hotel. A strange look appeared on his face, and he shook his head from side to side before his eyes returned to normal. Huangjing was in a similar state. As for Mok, there was only hatred in his eyes. It wasn't easy for him to calm himself down. The Green Hotel was located near the city center, and Radiant City had such a large surface area. They couldn't just walk over directly. That would be too slow. Extravagant and magnificent carriages drawn by wildebeests had been prepared outside the hotel. The 3 participating members Hu Yuhao, He Kai-Tu, and Huangjing took one carriage, while Nangong Wan, the 3rd elder, and Mok took another one. The remaining men in black loaded the miscellaneous rare metals on relatively simpler carriages, as they got on their respective horses. A majestic company of more than 100 people journeyed towards the western suburbs. Inside one of the carriages, Mok was full of righteous indignation as he asked, "Master, do we really have to use a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell as reward?" The 3rd elder frowned and snapped, "Shut up. Are you even worthy to comment?" Mok was unwilling inside, but he immediately withdrew his emotions when he saw the annoyance on his teacher's face. He knew that his teacher was very short-tempered. One of his senior brothers had spoken out against his teacher for a sentence or two some time ago, and his brain was instantly blown to smithereens. Third elder turned towards Nangong Wan and asked, "What do you think, second brother?" Nangong Wan's eyes were tinged with a layer of silver-grey light. The lighting inside the entire carriage became a little brighter, as if everything was covered with silver-grey hues. That kid is very sophisticated. He managed to recover so quickly after his initial temporary surprise, and this means that he has very strong spiritual power. Our guess should be right. He should be an evil soul master, who leans towards spiritual summoning abilities. However, he may not be from the Sun-Moon Empire. After all, with our sect's strength and influence and after so many years of searching and recruiting, it is impossible for us not to pull a prodigy like him to our side. This video will end here.